Rodger, Dodger, Bo Bodger, Rodger. Time to play the name game book tag. Hi guys, welcome back, bienvenue and all that jazz. Today we're just going to be doing a fun little tag video. So this tag I originally saw over on Madison from Madison Goodyear's booktube channel. I'll of course link her channel down below. And it just sounded like fun, so I thought I might as well kind of self-tag and see what happens. This book tag specifically is she kind of did it in two different ways, so I'm going to do it both ways as well. You basically need to find books with titles that start with the different letters of your name. We're spelling my name two different times. The first is with books that I love, and the second time will be with books that I want to read. So without any further ado, let's just jump straight into it, shall we? So first up, we'll do spelling my name, Rodger with a D. Oh. We'll start spelling my name with books that I love. And I just did a bookshelf tour video, so I talked about a lot of my favorites there. So I tried to avoid, when possible, doing repeats. And I also further upped the challenge by making it books that I own physically and trying to only do one book from any particular author. And so without any further ado, the first book I'd like to talk about is The Rise of Kyoshi by FC Yee. So for those of you who maybe I've never talked to about it before, I love Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra. Those shows and stories really just kind of captured my imagination, shall we say, when I was younger. And so when I saw that there was a novelization coming out about the history of one of the recent avatars, the previous Earth avatar Kyoshi, I wanted to see what it was about. We did get some hints of events that happened in her life when she was older, but these are kind of her events of learning that she's the avatar and learning to basically fulfill that role. And if you don't know, in the Avatar: The Last Airbender universe, basically there are different benders of different elements. So the four main elements: earth, fire, water, and air. And so, typically speaking, benders can only bend one element. However, there is one person, known as the Avatar, who can bend all four, and it's their duty to kind of oversee the peace of this world. And so this is the story of one person who's destined to become the Avatar that we know about from the show, and her story of how she gets there. It was actually surprisingly dark and violent and things like that. There's murders and stuff like that you don't really ever talk about or see in the show. So I would highly recommend, if you like Avatar: The Last Airbender, or even if you don't, you really don't need that show, because that show this happens many years before the show. This is many lifetimes before Aang, the Avatar that we see in the actual Nickelodeon show. So even if you haven't read Avatar and that kind of sounds cool to you, would highly recommend. They're basically meant to be a bridge between the human world and the world of spirits. Then the next letter, O. So for O, I have Obsidian Butterfly by Laurell Hamilton. So I have been reading the Anita Blake Vampire Hunter series, I don't even know, for a very long time, since junior high, probably at least. And so that would have been like 2001, 2002, somewhere in there. So I've been a long-time follower of this series and this author in particular. So this is a later book in the series, but it is one of my favorites to this day. So just to avoid being too spoilery, I'll be super vague, but basically in the Anita Blake Vampire Hunter series, Anita Blake is a legally sanctioned vampire executioner, because similar to kind of like the True Blood type show, if you've seen that show, vampires have recently come out of the coffin, if you will, and become legal citizens. And so when they commit crimes and things of that nature, they are too powerful to be locked in jails. We don't have jails that can hold them. And so there are legally sanctioned vampire executioners. And she is also, her day job is working as a animator. So she raises zombies for a living to help settle will disputes and like that kinds of thing. And so in this particular one, she gets called in by a friend to help him on a case. And she ends up in New Mexico with, I don't want to give any more details. She ends up in New Mexico basically trying to solve a mystery and helping her friend. And in this book in particular, the titular character, Obsidian Butterfly, or Itzpapalotl, is this basically psychotic ancient vampire who thinks that she's a goddess. And one of her powers is to literally like suck the essence out of people, and she can turn you into basically a living mummy because she thinks that she's this Aztec goddess. And so is she involved? Is she not involved? There's lots of interesting, fun twists and turns. So if you've never checked out Enid Blake, it starts with book 1, Guilty Pleasures, and you definitely want to read them in order, because I would say it's very similar to something like the Dresden Files, where the character gets experiences and kind of levels up over time. And so you really don't want to jump in somewhere super late on and be like, okay, well, what is all of this? So Enid Blake, Obsidian Butterfly. Then the next book is Dissolution. So this is book 1 of the War of the Spider Queen. So this obviously is covering the D in Rodger. Okay, anyways. So this is a book set in the Forgotten Realms setting, which is a Dungeons & Dragons campaign setting. And there are many different novels, series, authors that have written in that world. And it has to be one of my favorite like fantasy settings ever. I mean, you don't get much more rich of a lore than having like, I don't know, there's probably been hundreds of authors and hundreds of stories told in this world, fleshing out the different characters and the events and the timeline and all of that kinds of things. So, I mean, it doesn't get much more expansive of a universe than that. But The War of the Spider Queen in particular is a 6-book series, kind of like Rick Riordan Presents, where R.A. Salvatore, the author of the Drizzt saga, kind of masterminded the overall plot, and then each novel is written by a different author. But they are very cohesive, very good. And just because I want people to read this series so that you'll talk to me, I'm just going to briefly read a bit from the blurb, because I think it will get you more excited. So this is basically set in the Underdark, which is the world, like the caverns and stuff beneath the world of Faerun, which is the main world of the Forgotten Realms. I'm so sorry about all this dust. And so it centers on the evil elves known as the Drow. Prowling the dangerous slums of Menzoberranzan, the cunning wizard Faraun Mizrim must solve a baffling puzzle or die trying. Aiding him is his one true friend, weaponsmather Rild Argith, who soon realizes that the greatest powers in the city will stop at nothing to thwart them. Meanwhile, High Priestess Quenthel Bainray battles demonic assailants dispatched by an unknown foe, and Ambassador Farrell Zalvir learns that the matron mother herself has inexplicably turned against her, a calamity that can lead only to her demise. While their whole world is changing around them, these 4 champions struggle against different enemies, yet their paths will lead them all to the most terrifying discovery in the long history of the Drow, and set them on the quest to save not only Menzoberranzan, but the entire Dark Elf race from Dissolution. The War of the Spider Queen begins here. So the Spider Queen is the demon goddess Lolth, who is the patron god of these evil elves, the Drow, and she has gone silent, and they want to find out why. So maybe think about checking out War of the Spider Queen. Then for G, I have one of the books from the OG R.A. Salvatore. So this is one of the books in his very long-running Drizzt saga called Gauntlgrym. This is actually a quartet that is a kind of in-depth prequel to a MMORPG that you can actually play on PlayStation and Xbox and stuff like that. I play it on PlayStation personally, and I have a really good time with it. But Gauntlgrym is this lost dwarven homeland, think like Khazad-dûm, but we don't know where it is. And so he is friends with Bruenor Battlehammer, and they want to find out, where is the lost city of Gauntlgrym? I would say that the trilogies in the Drizzt saga are distinct enough that theoretically, if there was only one particular trilogy that like really excited you, you could probably read that without reading like previous ones. But also, like, why would you? Because it starts with the prequel trilogy, Homeland, Exile, and Sojourn, where you actually get to meet Drizzt. You get to see some of the politics and stuff happening in Menzoberranzan between the great houses with the matron mothers, which feature a lot in the War of the Spider Queen. They're all very conniving and backstabbing, and it's all about how do I get ahead in my society. So if you like those kind of gray, evil-y type characters, you would love War of the Spider Queen. Drizzt, however, is a much gentler soul, and that way of living just doesn't work for him. And so the original prequel trilogy is his journey of escaping the Underdark and getting out from under the yoke of these like psychotic matron mothers. This is a much later, you won't get as much of the relationships with his friends because you would have already gotten all of that build up in like the 20 books prior to this one. but this was such a fun time, and my husband and I played a lot of the MMO Neverwinter together when it first came out. And so this just has a special place in my heart because I love that video game. I love this series, and it's kind of fun having the two tie together. Then, I'm so sorry, we're still locked in the Forgotten Realms, but nobody ever talks about these books, and I don't want to just talk about books that everybody else does because you already know about Brandon Sanderson and like blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't need to talk as much about those. So I'm trying to hype some of my favorite series that are like, I would say less well known that I've never heard anybody talk about on BookTube. And so for E, I have Elminster Ascending. So this is actually a bind-up of the first 3 books in the Elminster saga. So that is Elminster, The Making of a Mage, Elminster and Myth Draenor, and The Temptation of Elminster. So I would say that this is a book for people who like classic fantasy and who like really intense magic sequences, magic battles, and all that kind of stuff. It is basically the very tried and true like Dungeons and Dragons-y type magic system where you need spell components and the right words and motions and stuff to make your spells happen. So there is that. So there's always like those limitations on the magic, right? Where if I don't have the right reagents, then I can't do the spell. So the magic isn't infinite, but it is a softer magic system than something like Sanderson. It is much more classic fantasy. So in Elminster, The Making of a Mage, you basically see the young child Elminster before he becomes a chosen of the goddess Mystra, before he becomes one of the most famous archmages in all of the history of this world. You really get to see his beginnings, and then you get to see him grow throughout the entire series. So just on the back, behind every legend is a truth. Beloved of the goddess, heir to untold magic, Elminster Almar, the sage of Shadowdale, is the most powerful wizard Faerun has ever known. Behind every hero is a man, but he was not born that way. Magic and valor did not come easily. Young Elminster fought first for survival and second for vengeance. Heroism was never part of the plan. Behind every victory is a sacrifice, until his whole world is destroyed by an angry mage lord whose wanton cruelty sparks the formation of one of the greatest heroes ever known and changes the realms forever. So if that sounds good to you, you should definitely check this out. I really need to reread this series. I haven't read it in a very long time, but I remember some parts of it because Elminster is one of my favorite characters in fantasy. So if you want to maybe check it out, maybe later this year or something, let me know. And then finally, I had to be a basic bitch, I'm not going to lie. So for the second R, what else is there to choose besides J.R.R. Tolkien's The Return of the King, book 3 in the Lord of the Rings. If you haven't read the Lord of the Rings, you're sleeping. It can be a little bit harder to get into. The writing style is a much more like formal writing style than more modern authors, but this is a timeless tale. So you should definitely, if you haven't, read Lord of the Rings. What is wrong with you? And this is a beautiful, illustrated by Alan Lee, illustrated edition with full color illustrations throughout. And so this is a wonderful version. So if you have never read Lord of the Rings, maybe get a cool illustrated edition. It does help. And so I don't think this is too spoiler because you won't know who any of these characters are if you haven't read it. But here's like an example of one of the full color illustrations that are in this book. So that finishes my name with books that I already know and love. So let's just jump straight into part 2, where we're going to spell my name with books that I want to read. First up, I'm kind of cheating because I'm using Ruin, which is book 2 in the Faithful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne. I haven't even read book 1, but I'm planning to do it in March. There's a whole read-along going on. Link to the Discord is down below in those comments. So if you want to join us, there is definitely still time for you to do so. And so I'm cheating and using Ruin, book 2 of the Faithful and the Fallen, because I have a feeling that I'm going to love this epic fantasy series with these awesome like weapon covers. And I'm so excited to start this series next month. I don't know much about it. I think there's 2 chosen ones. There's like an evil chosen one and a good chosen one. And there's a prophecy that they are fated to battle or something, but we'll find out in March. Then for O, I have read the first couple books in the Disney Twisted Tales series. So this is, I think, the 3rd book that was published, but obviously they're all completely separate. So these are basically, they have different taglines on them that kind of give you an idea of what they're going to be about. So this one is, what if the Sleeping Beauty never woke up. So they all have these kind of like interesting little like what if scenarios posed on the covers. And then it's just, they tend to start very much like the original Disney movies that you have most likely seen and know. And then they kind of deviate from there based on whatever their what if scenario is. And so I'm really excited to keep going on this series. It's kind of a fun palate cleanser in between. And I'm kind of cheating because I'm using a book 2 again for my name, but shh, this is my version of this game. So in my bookshelf tour, I talked a lot about Prospero's Children, and so this is book 2 in that series. They have very clear arcs in and of themselves from what I vaguely remember. So this is a series that I read when I was in junior high as well. And my memories of books 2 and 3 are literally just like, I remember liking them, but like any details of anything, character names, plot, I have nothing. So I'm really excited to pick up this trilogy again and check it out. And so this is part of, I don't even know that the trilogy has a name. I don't know. But I don't want to read anything about it because it has definitely like spoilers in the blurb on the back and stuff like that. So here's D. Then for G, we have Gardens of the Moon, Book 1, and the Malazan Book of the Fallen by Stephen Erikson. Again, another book series that I'm just excited to start. I am working my way on finishing up the Wheel of Time in the next few months, and then this will be my next big series that I tackle. I think that it's kind of very expansive in scope. I don't know if it covers many generations of this world or what, but I just hear that it is the most epic of epic fantasy, but it is also incredibly depth, full of themes, and really interesting and fascinating lore and world building, and so I'm here for it. Then, we have another book 2. So this is Elven Star, book 2 in the Deathgate cycle by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. And again, I don't remember anything about this, so let's just grab book 1 real quick, so that I can give you a little bit of the blurb. Ages ago, sorcerers of unmatched power sundered a world into 4 realms: sky, stone, fire, and water, then vanished. Over time, magicians learned to work spells only in their own realms and forgot the others. Now only the few who have survived the labyrinth and crossed the death gate know of the presence of all 4 realms, and even they have yet to unravel the mysteries of their severed world. And so this book 1 has to do with Arianis, which is the realm of sky, and then book 2 takes place in Steamy Prion, the realm of fire. So from what I very vaguely remember, each book, at least in the beginning, covers a different like elemental realm, and then you kind of branch off from there. But I have no memory of this place. So this is another thing that I'm really interested in picking back up and rereading this series. And then finally, we have the second R, and that is going to be the Red Scrolls of Magic, which is book 1 in the Eldest Curses series. And so this is kind of like a companion series to the Mortal Instruments. So in the Mortal Instruments, there's this really lovely gay couple, Magnus and Alec. I don't know why their names are like so... Anyways, and at one point they're off on like some kind of vacation, and I guess this like, I think it's supposed to be a trilogy, kind of tells the story of what they were doing when they were off doing other things. And I think it takes place in between books maybe 5 and 6 in the Mortal Instruments. And so I'm assuming that there's probably spoilers in this for things that happen in the Mortal Instruments, so you should probably read that first if you want to read this. I really have no idea though, because I've never really talked to anybody that's read the Eldest Curses. But I mean, it's pretty short. The Shadowhunters universe is just a super fun time. So, I mean, in between these super heavy, dense fantasy novels, it's nice to have some cotton candy to kind of mix in there. And so this is for the second R. And so that's all I have for you guys. This was the name game book tag. So that's my name, Rodger, with a D. Aww. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to do this tag, feel free to do so. Like, tag, you're it. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!